That is Jonathan Ferguson, the keeper of Firearms and Artillery at the Royal Armouries Museum in the UK, and I'm Dave Jewitt, the host of Loadout, the GameSpot show that delves into pop culture's most iconic weapons. And on today's episode, Jonathan's going to be breaking down a variety of weapon attachments and talking about how they're portrayed within our video games.
Expressing your personality and whim by customizing your gun. I mean, I generally end up finding a configuration that I like and sticking with it.
If you like this kind of content, make sure to subscribe, as we have plenty of episodes of Loadout for you to check out on our channel, including last week's episode all about the various gaming tropes of weapon customization. And on top of that, we'll still be showing Jonathan new gaming arsenals every Saturday, so make sure to check out those too. Right, let's get into the chat.
So, attachments, obviously, kitting out your weapon is a very common thing in video games now. We see so much seemingly random ones and weird ones. The way they balance is like really interesting. So I want to talk to you about how they work in the real world. Like heavy barrels. Heavy barrels is a pretty common one these days. What advantage does a heavier barrel give you?
Yeah, so as with most of these things, that's taken from the real gun world. Traditionally, a heavy barrel is, well, got one sitting in front of me, at least somewhat heavy. It's heavy toward the rear. It's a big thing on machine guns. So it heats up less quickly and is stiffer because there's more metal in it. So although it will wobble less, might sound silly, but thin barrel will wobble between shots, especially depending on what forces are being applied by the mechanism of the gas system. So a thicker barrel wobbles less, and it wobbles more predictably if it's been properly stress relieved. So a heavy barrel is desirable for either a machine gun or an accurate rifle like a sniper rifle. Some assault rifles will have a quote-unquote heavy barrel that is relatively more heavy. So the M16A2, one of the changes there was a thicker barrel with the theory of making the gun more accurate. Of course, what it does is make it more heavy, and in that case, more front heavy.
Right. And I think this is something very recognizable in video games today, as well as having an underslung grenade launcher. I think that's very common sort of unlocked attachment. But again, from the things that we've discussed, they're not always implemented well. It's in a video game, it feels like you're just sort of eyeballing and guessing it, whereas I don't know if you had it on this example, but they usually come with their own grenade launcher scopes, and that's not really something we see implemented in video games. It's the weird reticule on the screen, or
almost a throwback to early FPS where there'd be literally just a representation of a sight on the screen, rather than the iron sights. It's rare to see grenade iron sights or optics, because nowadays they're more likely to be. I mean, that's an early experimental version of a grenade sight that piggybacks on the front of the CSAT sight. But it's kind of weird that they don't always do the full job on that. Almost like the grenade sight is an afterthought. I mean, you hear stories of, certainly the M79 gunners in Vietnam would learn to aim by instinct and by experience like an archer. So that's, again, based on a bit of reality, but if you're issuing this one per squad, or two per squad in the British Army, you don't learn by feel. I mean, it's a waste of ammo apart from anything else. You are taught to fire with the sight, just like you are the rifle.
one thing that I think is very common in games today, like when I play Escape from Tarkov or Call of Duty, I like having big mags on my weapons, just like keep up the hurt on the enemy or whatever, especially with Escape from Tarkov, where you've got to get punched through someone's armor and they're very unwieldy. But drum magazines aren't, again, it's one of those things that their life in video games is much more than their existence in real life, right? There's a lot of drawbacks to a drum magazine. So why is it that, most militaries and things like that don't really use a drum mag?
Yeah, well, the kind of, probably the best way to explain this is to go back in time to the Thompson. So the 1928 model Thompson that was adopted with a drum mag, and certainly the British forces bought them with the drums and the 20-round box mags, and before very long they realised that they were extra heavy, extra bulky, and it's quicker and more efficient to just change out 20-round magazines. And the makers, Auto Ordnance and Colt, realised as well that better to have an extendo box mag, 30-round, and just bin the drum magazine. And then you could also eliminate the machining cuts on the receiver that would hold up production. Although since then, drum mags have kept coming back as an idea. They never really catch on for anything other than turning life to empty on a range. And of course in the movies and in games, they're a big thing there. Reliability is another issue with them because you've just got more working parts to worry about.
It sounds like some of the problems that they had back during their inception have never really gone away then.
No, I mean this is an experimental SA-80 with an American M203 launch on it, we should say. There was even a C-mag, so a 100-round double drum mag, trialled on the SA-80, if you can imagine that. So actually the one in Call of Duty with the drum on it has a hint of realism about it, but quickly decided it wasn't going to work.
And then obviously a very common one are sort of modern red dot sights. And I think we've talked a little bit about how that's sort of become, it's influenced all the way back around, and now we're getting MP40s with aircraft sights on. And I think any like big firearms fan that plays video games shares the frustrations on that. But I think this is what I suppose a lot of Call of Duty players know. Picatinny rails are also very iconic, but there's like obviously different types of attachment options and rail systems and stuff.
Yeah, this one has both Picatinny or M1913 mil standard, 1913. Now a NATO standard, by the way, it's that ubiquitous, but also M-lock slots. These aren't just cooling holes, these are for fitting attachments directly onto those slots. So it's becoming quite common to have an optical rail on the top, and then all of the other slots will be something like M-lock.
And I suppose it is sort of realistic in a way because from what we've said before, most firearms that are issued to armed forces do come with some sort of optic now.
Oh yeah.
And I suppose the other things that we don't really have here are things like foregrips, things like we do have, is that a torch on the bottom here? So again, this would be something I think is very recognizable to someone that likes to customize their weapons in video games. It does feel like it adds a good bit of heft once you start, because then these aren't simple devices, are they?
No.
Like they're glass and metal for the most part. They do add a fair bit of heft, which I suppose is something that not a lot of games really plays on. Like
not really.
The continually added weight of a weapon. I Escape from Tarkov does it to some degree with the ergonomics, but it is surprising when you sort of handle it, how it feels. You can feel that it's heavier here and heavier towards the front. So I suppose we've got a long way to go when it comes to the realism of attachments, but I think we've talked about it before, the gameplay that it affords people is quite fascinating. But I know you're someone that likes to keep their weapons fairly vanilla. I
do, yeah. I'd be veering more toward that MCX there, just with the simple close quarters optic on it. I mean, this is a good example, actually. This is clearly an immediate descendant of M16A1. Super light, like 6 pounds in old money. You could fire it even I could fire it one-handed. It's incredibly, brilliantly light. And then what do? We give it a fat, heavy barrel. We add additional bits of mechanism to it. We add steel and glass that adds another couple of pounds. A suppressor, a flashlight. And before you know it, you've put back on that weight that you managed to get off. And it's almost like a dieting thing. You are going up and down through history, trying to keep the gun down to that sweet spot of about 7 pounds.
There's a lot, you could talk about attachments for ages, but it is fascinating with how much sort of you can throw on a weapon. But it seems that from what I've played and what I've learned talking to you, we've still got some way in incorporating them in any sort of accuracy. I think there are still frustrations when I look at a menu in a weapons customization and it's telling me one thing and it's like, that's not how it works. But in the case of video games, I think if that doesn't happen, then everyone's going to be using the same thing and it's going to be overpowered, right?
Yeah,
so
that's what it boils down to. And of course, expressing your personality and whim by customizing your gun. I mean, I generally end up finding a configuration that I like and sticking with it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for watching this week's episode of Loadout. If you enjoyed, please do like the video and subscribe, and maybe even let me know in the comments down below or on Twitter @IrregularDave what you'd like to see an episode on. If you want more video game firearms content, you can watch our back catalogue of previous episodes or check out our weekly series of Firearms Expert Reacts, where I show our friends at the Royal Armouries a slew of guns to break down. This will be our last new episode of Loadout for a little while, so on behalf of the whole crew, I'd just like to thank you for watching and supporting the show. It's been an absolute joy to make it and bring it to you guys, and we'll hopefully be back with more episodes later in the year. Until then, I've been your host Dave Jewitt, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.